Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for, let's get into today's episode. So welcome to episode number 5 of the Training for Trekking podcast. So today we're going to be talking about an issue that's very, very common in the hiking and trekking world, and that is how to train to carry for a heavy pack. If you've ever done a heavy pack carry before, you'll know it adds a whole extra dynamic of difficulty than a standard trek. And having to lug around 10, 15, 20 kilos on your back really does make things very, very difficult. And the issue with this is the advice you generally see on the internet is just incredibly generic and doesn't really help you out. So usual answers to this is things like go out and train with a pack, or build up slowly, or make sure you get your pack fitted. But when it comes down to it, this stuff is really nothing more than common sense. So today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some specific things you can do that's going to help these pack walks become easier, more accomplishable, and also reduce your risk of injury while you're doing these things. So to start with, we're going to be talking about loaded pack carrying. Now, this is obviously the most relevant type of training you can be doing to train for a heavy pack, and it's simply just getting a pack on your back and doing some different types of walking. Now, before, the standard thing what people do is they'll just put a loaded pack on, hit the trail, and just leave it at that. But as with any type of thing in the fitness world, if a little bit of structure and a little bit of planning goes an incredibly long way to increasing the effectiveness of this type of thing, and also reducing the risk of injury. So to start with, we're going to say there's 2 different types of pack walking you want to include in your training. To start with, it's just simple trail pack walking, and this involves basically hitting your normal training hikes with a loaded pack. There are a few principles you want to be following here. To start with, when you're progressing week by week by week on your training hikes, try not to increase the distance of your hikes by more than 20% each time, or at least the time that you're walking by 20%. Now, this is incredibly important because when people tend to do these big jumps in distance and time, and that's when they start to pull up sore, they start to be at risk of overuse injuries, and it's really not something you want to be doing. And if you're leading up into a particular trek, you don't want to be risking any of these issues. So, number 1, don't increase your distance on the trail by more than 20%. Number 2 is when you're loading up your pack, you want to start with 5% of your body weight in your pack. Now, everyone is going to weigh a little bit different. Everyone's going to be a bit stronger. So just giving you generic kilos isn't going to be a handy thing. So 5% of your body weight is a good place to start, and most people can pretty much handle that. Now, as you're going through your hikes, every 4 weeks, you want to increase that pack weight by 5% again. So if you're doing it every single week, increasing, and also increasing distance and time, that's going to be a bit of a recipe for a little bit of pain. But if you do it every 4 weeks, then that's going to be relatively controlled stimulus that's going to be very, very good for you. And then when you're packing your bag with this type of weights, try to avoid using things like dumbbells or weight plates or really, really dense types of weights, because these really don't sit well in your pack, and they're not mimicking how you're actually going to be carrying your pack on the trail. And they do tend to make people relatively uncomfortable, and they can pull up with things like lower back pain. Instead, I usually recommend filling up water bottles and loading that in your pack, or using bags of rice or even dog food, I've heard someone say before, and then filling out your pack with towels just to give that full size of your pack that you want. Now, that's your first thing, a trail pack walking. Number 2, you want to be looking at overloaded pack walking. So this is where you're basically going to be upping the weight quite substantially in your pack and having even more weight than you would be when you're walking. Now, the idea behind this is to overload the muscles, add a whole bunch of extra stimulus to get them super strong and also quite resilient. So when you actually go on the trail with your normal pack, it's going to feel quite a bit easier. But obviously, it's not very practical or safe to be doing this in your normal pack walking. So this is where you want to be applying interval training into your preparation. So interval training is basically doing periods of relatively higher intensity exercise broken up with periods of rest. And that way you can really push your body a little bit more and also do it in a way that's very, very time efficient. Now, most people's idea of interval training is doing this type of sprint training or this HIIT that you see in so many gyms around the world at the moment. And that's not what we're talking about here. Instead, we're talking about interval training, which is very, very specific to the world of trekking. So this is a great workout, which I'd highly recommend you give a go. Now, you're going to find a hill or set of stairs that's going to take 10 or minutes or more that's for you to climb. Now, the steeper, the better here. So really trying to find a good one for this. You're going to load up your pack with between 10 and 25% of your body weight in water bottles. Now, this is going to depend on how fit you are, how strong you are, and which stages you are at in your preparation. But my usual advice is not to go way too heavy too soon and do a little bit less than you'd expect you'd be able to do. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to climb up to the top of the hill or set of stairs as quickly as you can. Once you get to the top, you're going to empty out all your water bottles at the top, and then you're going to walk back down to the bottom. Now, using the water bottles with this way is very, very important because, as we've talked about previously, walking downhill can put quite a bit of pressure in your knees. And if you're doing these repeats with quite a high load on your back, it's going to really grind you up. So by emptying out the water bottles at the top and then getting to the bottom and then refilling them at a tap or a river or something like that, it's a really easy way to still get the stimulus of the overloaded pack walking, but save your joints from any type of injury. And then once you've got to the bottom, you've refilled it, then you're going to walk up again. And you're going to repeat that 3 to 4 times. Now, as with any type of training, you want to not be doing the same thing over and over and over and over again because your body's going to get used to that. It's not going to have any new stimulus, and it's not really going to be challenged to adapt and get fitter, stronger, more resilient, or anything like that. So each week that you do it, you want to alternate between 2 things. The second time you do it, you want to add an extra repetition onto the hill or the set of stairs. So instead of doing 3, you're going to do 4. And then the next time you do it, you're going to add an extra 5% of your body weight into your pack. And then each time you do it, you're going to alternate between adding extra repetition and an extra 5%. And week by week by week, that's going to get more challenging, but you're also going to get fitter. And that's a really, really good way of going about it. So now we've talked about your pack walking, and that's probably your most specific stuff that you're going to be doing to help you train for a heavy pack. But now we're going to move on to strength training. So strength training, as I've said before, is often very neglected by the hikers and trekkers of the world. But it is very, very beneficial for a whole bunch of different reasons. And in particular, if you're carrying a heavy pack, any extra strength you have in your legs is going to transfer really, really well onto the trail. But when we're talking about strength training, we're not just talking about doing squats and lunges in your bedroom and just repeating that over and over and over again, as many trek preparation programs have, because that's only going to give you very, very limited benefits. Instead, we want to go through a series of progression. We want to be challenging the body in both muscular strength and muscular endurance, which are 2 very different things. And we want to be doing everything you can to give you those benefits on the trail. So instead of diving into too much of the science today, I'm just going to give you a very, very simple training guidelines, which more or less anyone can follow. So to start with, in your first little phase of training, so when you're first getting into your strength training, you want to be choosing 3 or 4 exercises for your lower body. Ideally, one of them will be some type of squat, another one will be some type of deadlift, another one will be some type of lunge or step up, and another one will be some type of single-legged hip dominant move. So that'll be something like a single leg deadlift or a single leg glute bridge or something like that. So you got your 4 exercises there. You're going to do each exercise, perform each exercise for 10 to 12 repetitions. You're going to have a 90-second rest, and you're going to do each exercise 4 times. Now, this is a very, very basic strength program, and this is what's called as the preparatory phase. So it's basically just you're taking the time to learn these movements, get proficient at the movements, and this first stage, you don't have to push yourself too much, but you're still going to see some relatively significant gains in your strength. Now, depending on how much time you have in your program, how much training history you have, and a whole bunch of other things, this phase will go anywhere between about 4 and 8 weeks. But if you are working up a 12-week program, 4 weeks is probably what you spend here. Once you've done that and you've sort of got the hang of these moves and you've sort of been pushing yourself, getting a little bit stronger, we're going to move into something that's called the strength phase. So this is what it's going to be developing pure muscular strength, which is really, really important for when you're moving on the trail for your movement efficiency, getting up the hills and inclines with the pack on your back, and also injury prevention. So what you want to be doing here is you're going to take the same exercises you've been doing, and you're just going to add a little bit extra load and reduce the repetitions you've been doing. So as opposed to doing 10 to 12 repetitions, you're going to go down to 6 to 8 repetitions. Now, this is a whole bunch of extra stimulus for the body. It's going to be really, really good for it. But to get the best benefits out of this, you're going to have to increase the rest that you're doing. So as opposed to 90 seconds in between, you're going to need 2 to 3 minutes in between each exercise. Now, obviously, hanging around for 2 to 3 minutes in between exercises is a bit long and it's a bit boring, and it's not really just standing around. It's not really a good use of your time. So in this period, I highly recommend you do some type of core training, mobility training, or even upper body training, as long as those legs are getting a good rest. Now, again, this phase will go anywhere between about 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how long you have. But once you've spent your time there, then you're going to move into what's called the muscular endurance phase. So the muscular endurance phase is where you're going to take all that really raw strength, which is going to be really, really good for you, and you're going to turn into very, very specific trekking strength. So basically, muscular endurance is trying to simulate the same feeling you get when you're going up a hill for minutes and minutes and minutes on end. You're getting that burn, they're getting shaky, they're getting tired, and you're trying to develop the muscles in a way that they can withstand this and also thrive under this. So the muscular endurance phase is basically taking all the same exercises you've been doing for however many weeks now, and you're going to reduce the weight, and you're going to go up to 20 repetitions or more. So you don't really need a huge amount of weight here, but you just want to be really challenging the endurance. Now, one thing you want to note here is this bit, we're not really looking for a cardio blast. So you don't have to be huffing and puffing. You don't have to be really going really super quick speeds, but you want to be choosing weights where you're getting a burn through the legs, but you're not absolutely out of breath, and you should still be able to carry on a conversation while you're training. And that's very, very important to be getting this specific adaptations of the muscular endurance. Now, this phase is what's generally trekkers and hikers tend to spend the most time in, but you probably only need to, as a maximum, spend 4 to 6 weeks doing this type of stuff. Any longer than that, you're probably better spent using those weeks in the more pure strength phase, just purely because the body gets used to this stuff really quickly and you don't need a huge amount of time to develop it. So if you add those up, you've got your preparatory phase, you've got your muscular strength phase, and then your endurance phase. And that's really the basics of any type of strength training program for trekking. And if you apply that, it's going to be really, really beneficial for any type of trekking. And then also, if you've got a heavy pack on your back, it's going to be absolutely amazing for that. So next we want to talk about developing your core. So heavy pack on your back, it's going to be putting a whole bunch of strain through your back. If your core and your abdominal muscles are not strong enough to support your back and protect it, it's going to take a fair bit of pressure. And obviously we don't want that. Now, traditional core training is really, really not very good. Anything, 9 times out of 10 on trek preparation programs, if you see any type of core training, it's just in the form of sit-ups and crunches, which I'm sure you've done before. But these things are so old school, they don't really do that much, and they're not very relevant to what we want to be doing. Instead, you want to be looking at what something is called anti-movement training, which is basically teaching the body to resist movement as opposed to create it in the abdominals. Now, without getting too technical here, I'm going to give you 3 exercises that you can look up, and they're going to be incredibly beneficial for your pack preparation. So number 1 are dead bugs. Now, dead bugs are training the body in something that's called anti-extension, which is basically teaching the body to prevent hyperextending the back, which is very, very common for people wearing a pack. Now, dead bugs are an incredible exercise. You can progress it in a whole bunch of different ways. So no matter how strong you are, there's always going to be an option for you. And it's something I include in every single preparation program for my trekkers. Number 2, you want to be doing some form of side planks. So side planks are doing something that's called anti-lateral flexion. So teaching the body not to fall over to the side. Very, very relevant if you've got a heavy pack on your back and you take a step in a hole or you have a stumble or something, it's going to be super, super important for you. So some type of side planks. And then thirdly, you want to do something that's called a pail-off press, which is a bit of a different move that you may not have done before. So I highly recommend you look that up. But basically, it's teaching the body to do something that's called anti-rotation. So stopping the body rotating and falling around. Now, again, this is going to be very important for you if you've got your pack on your back, if you get a snag, if you have a slip or a stumble or something like that. It's just protecting your back from there. But that's a very, very brief rundown on some type of core training for your pack walking, but put those 3 exercises into your preparation program and it will go a long way. And then finally, we're going to be talking about recovery. So training for any type of trekking is relatively strenuous, but training for heavy pack trek and doing the stuff we've just been talking about is really a big step up, and it's going to put a lot of strain through your body, and it's going to stress the joints quite a bit. So you really need to be putting the emphasis on trying to aid the body in recovering and adapting, because if you don't, more than likely you're going to pull up with, at the very least, a lot of muscle soreness, at the worst, some injuries. So putting the time into recovery is something that I could not understate is so important. So a few things that you can do, really simple to start with, is regular mobility. So foam rolling, if you've never done it before, it's basically getting one of these long foam rollers, just rolling it across the muscles nice and gently. It's really effective at reducing muscle soreness. I would highly recommend doing 5 to 10 minutes of that every single day, and even spending a little bit longer on 1 or 2 days in the week. Regular stretching, again, that's also quite beneficial, so that can just relieve a bit of soreness. I would usually recommend trying to spend 5 minutes again every single day trying to stretch out particular muscles. Spending at least 60 seconds in each stretch can go really a long way. And on top of that, I would say usually in my programs, I recommend on days where you don't have any training, not to have that as a complete rest day, but use that as something that's called a recovery day. So schedule in half an hour to do some stretching and some foam rolling. It really is very beneficial. So other things you can do is making sure you get a full night's sleep. So 8 hours sleep is really essential when you're training hard. It really cannot be understated how important that is. You might be able to get away with shorter amounts of sleep day to day and function on 4, 5, 6 hours sleep. But if you're training hard, it is incredibly important. So make sure you're making that happen. And then there's other things like active recovery. So if you do have a day off, just trying to move around a little bit. So whether it's doing some type of low intensity general exercise like swimming or pool running or just simply walking, really beneficial. And then also nutrition. So trying to stay hydrated through the days, trying to get plenty of veggies, plenty of protein through the week is really beneficial to your recovery. So if you put all those factors together, so what we talked about today, which was the trail pack walking, the overloaded pack walking, the strength training program, which had the phases of the preparatory phase, the strength phase, and the muscular endurance phase, the core training, which had those dead bugs, the side planks, and the payloft press, and also some type of recovery practices, that is going to put you miles ahead of 99% of the population in the trekking world, and it's going to make you so much more comfortable and also successful in any type of heavy pack walking you have coming up. So if you do have a heavy pack trek coming up, I highly recommend you get involved with that. It's really going to help you, and I cannot understate how beneficial this type of stuff is. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. I really hope you got some things out of there. There's a lot of information to digest, but I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you very soon. You've been listening to the Training for Trekking podcast. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review us in iTunes. So thanks for getting involved, and we'll see you on the next one.